Fine. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. So basically, the sheet which is the Tefilla, the order of priority for women, that was just really a follow-up from last week. So I referred to, it's quite complicated, and as correctly pointed out last week, it would actually be useful to have a printed out sheet. It's based on a very, very helpful and useful article from Rav Doni on Neustadt. That's the. Sorry. Is that problem? Just there are a few people who can join us first. So carefully positioned. Anyway, so basically, it is a little bit complicated to know what to say when one's time is limited, and the idea of the list, as it says very clearly at the top, is based on, ideally, of course, one would say everything in the list. In practice, that's often not possible, and therefore it's useful to know what the order of priority is. The important thing to bear in mind is that if, let's say, you've got, say, 10, 15 minutes or whatever it is, then you should do it in order. That's what's confusing about the list, because the list is completely out of order, because it's a priority list. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So in other words, it's saying, like, if you only had time to do one, then you would just do one. But if, let's say, you have time for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then do them in the right order, not in the order that they're listed on the sheet, if that makes sense. So so you would start with brachos and then you would go through. But there are some anomalies there which I think people are not so familiar with, such as, for example, as we explained last time, the reasons why the brachos of around Kriya Shema, like Yotzar and Avo Rabbah, actually come much further down the list than a number of other, other elements, other components in terms of priority. The basic and most important priority, beyond the obvious, basic, simple idea of just doing something, is the Shemona Esrei of Shachar and Mincha, as we explained. So that's that. And obviously, if anything's unclear, then just let me know. Was that? Oh, sorry, sheet. Yes.
Give me the watch. No,
okay. That is that one, and this is the one.
Yeah.
So what I've done in terms of the other sheet here is in the sheet for today is a two-sided sheet, and it's deliberately brief because I want to cover quite a bit. And the idea really is that these are almost like bullet points. So feel free to make notes or whatever. I didn't. Rather than trying to replicate everything that I hope to share with you and say, I felt it would be more helpful to have bullet points on a sheet. There are some bits and pieces that I've put in full, but mainly it's kind of bullet points so you can sort of take notes or whatever. There will be a recording available afterwards for those who want to listen again or whatever. That will be the Zoom recording. So what I think we want to achieve with this session is really the idea on and the concept of weekday davening, and the fact that it brings with it all the inevitable pressures that we all have when it comes to weekdays. Not that Shabbos is that easy, but we'll deal with Shabbos. We'll deal with Shabbos next time. Shabbos has its own dilemmas and own pathway towards connection. But when it comes to connection amidst the chaos, I think that's probably the best way of putting it. We often feel that if we can connect sort of once in a week, we've achieved something. So the question is, are there any particular pathways towards helping strengthen that connection? And really, if you like, I wouldn't say straightforward, but ideas that are user-friendly for davening. Let's put it like that. And that's really the aim. Please do stop me if there's anything that's unclear, or you'd like me to expand on anything, or indeed anything practical points that come up as we go along. I think for a focus in terms of our davening, it's incredibly helpful to begin with Chana, because Chana, of course, is the model of Tefillah in so many different ways. Chana is the one we know first davens quietly. That's all we have the model for Shemona Esrei from and everything else. But there's a very, very beautiful and profound aspect of Chana's Tefillah that the Gemara brings out, which is much more subtle. There's a dialogue that goes on between Eli, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, and Chana. And as part of that dialogue, Chana uses the words, and we're not going to have time to go into the whole thing. You can look it up. It's in the first parak of Shmuel. El hanar hazeh hispalalti. She says, I davened for this boy who was Shmuel, the boy that was born. There was the context is we'll see in a minute how the Gemara understands what the context of these words are. I davened for this boy. Hashem li yashir. See, Hashem has granted me what I asked. Hashem has granted my request. I davened for this young boy. That's what he was at the time. And Hashem has granted my request. Now, the Gemara explains in Brachos that the background to this dialogue between Chana and Eli HaKohen. It's obviously this after Hannah's been granted a son. She had to, that was her tefillah, that she davened that she would be granted a son. When that tefillah is granted, what happens is that Shmuel is brought into the Beis Hamikdash, and he's there with Eli HaKohen. He's sort of there serving him in various ways, and something comes up which the Kohen Gadol, Eli, considers to be a very severe offense. And he effectively says that he's Chayav Misa. The Gemara explains that he was Mora Halacha B'fnei Rabbah. He paskened the Shaila when he shouldn't have. He should have referred it to Eli as the high priest, as the Kohen Gadol, and he didn't, and he paskened it himself. He decided the Shaila, and it was a very tense moment. This is how the Gemara explains what was going on. He being Shmuel, right? So he says, this I'm sort of paraphrasing the essence of the Gemara. That's at the beginning of the second line of the small print in the 3 lines of Hebrew. So she said that the halacha is, if you go and rule in the presence of your teacher, of your Rebbe Chayav Misa, what can I do? Now, Asya Chana v'katzavcha kamei. So Chana came, his mother, and wept in front of Eli. And she said, Aniho Isha Hanitzevesim Chabazed. Do you not remember that I was the woman who stood here davening? I davened so hard, I prayed for this boy, for this son. How can you take him away from me? How can you say that he's liable to the death penalty? Omar Lo, he said to her, Shavki li'de'anshe, leave me alone, and I have to punish him. Obo'ino rachmi, and I will daven, the Yohev Loch Rabbo Minei. I'll give you a greater son than him. Not a problem. Yeah, I will daven, and Hashem will grant you someone that's even greater than him. Omra Le, she responded, El Hanar Hazeh Espalati. I have davened for this young boy. And
that specific one.
Yes, and that's the point. The Marsha brings this out from the Gemara. This is the bold print. The bold print in the next line. This one is cherished. This one is precious to me. Ali de tefilasi, because he came through my tefillah. Mishiavolid li acher ali de tefiloseich, tefiloscha. Than another one being born. Another one being born through ali de tefiloscha, through your tefillah. Now, let's just pass around here. I want to pass down the sheets. Oh, you've got them? Okay, great, excellent. Right. So, what the point being made here, I think is incredibly profound. What is going on is that Eli HaKohen is saying, I'm the Kohen Gadol, right? I'm the Kohen Gadol, right? And I can daven for you, and I can daven that you'll have another son. It's not the end of the world. Now, of course, let's leave aside the fact that any parent would find that incredibly. Let's just take the essence of what the Gemara is trying to convey, and pop by the side the specifics of the the scenario, in the sense that how would anyone want to give up absolutely. Let's leave that by the side for a second, and let's just think about the point the Gemara is making. She responds and says, I don't mind what you say. I know that you're incredibly holy and great and everything else, and you can daven that I'll have a son, and that son will be even greater than this one. To me, this is precious because it came through my prayer, through my tefillah. El hanar hazeh espalati. This is what I daven for. And because I daven for him, this is the only one I want. I don't want any others. The message and the essence of that, again, detaching it from the context that it's expressed in, not because that's not the context isn't important, but because I think we need to take the message for our own tefillah, is, as I titled this section, the power of the personal. We should never belittle our prayers. That's the message. The message is we should never think to ourselves that what we do or manage to achieve in tefillah is never going to be enough, right? We're never going to be replicating the Rebbetzin Kanievsky, or someone like that. We're never going to get there. We're a million miles away. The message of Chana is that's not the point. The point is that whatever comes through our own tefillah is incredibly precious. Now, we never know what the result necessarily about tefillah is going to be, but the preciousness of tefillah is something that is immensely important. Appreciating the power of the personal. When we invest ourselves in tefillah, to whatever level we can invest in it, that has a tremendous impact. And it becomes more precious than anything else in this sense. Rav Hirsch expresses the same idea with Adon Olam. Adon Olam is a tefillah, which is one of these tefillahs which we neglect so much, but is so immensely powerful. Adon Olam, we many people begin, say, I don't know, first thing of the day, whatever, before the brachas, many people say it every day. Many shuls, as we do, Shabbos, the end of the davening, although unfortunately everyone has already given up by then, which is rather sad, because Adon Olam is this immense tefillah. The power of Adon Olam, says Rav Hirsch, is the fact that it gives us the ability to approach Hashem, understanding that he is Adon Olam, he is the master of the whole world, and yet he is also Keli. Who Keli v'chai goli? He is my personal God. Now, Hirsch says the whole power of Adon Olam is the contrast. Next time you pick up a siddur and you look at Adon Olam, it really strikes you, this contrast. The first half is about the cosmos. It's about the universe. Hashem malach b'terem kol hazeh. Hashem reigned before anything else. Hashem is greater and beyond anything I can possibly comprehend. And then it immediately shifts. V'hu Keli, but he's my God. He's personal to me. He cares about me, and my tefillah is important to him. And that's why that is the comfort that Adon Olam brings. That's why many people say Adon Olam before they go to sleep. It's also in the tefillah, in the siddur there. It's something which, we should never know this, but as a Rav, I've been in circumstances where people are in their last moments, and I've actually sung Adon Olam with them. And it brings even people who are not necessarily that connected to Yiddishkeit. It brings them that feeling of comfort. They remember that from their childhood, and it's the comfort of Adon Olam is those words: I will entrust my spirit to him when I go to sleep, and I will wake up. We live in an incredibly dangerous world. We never know what the next minute will bring, but we can say, I entrust my spirit to you, Hashem. So this is the power of Adon Olam. It's from the majestic to the personal. That's how I put it on the sheet. For those who join us, I said the sheets are really just sort of bullet points, and kind of can expand on each point as we go along. That's really great. So let's look at number 2, which is the concept of a meaningful moment. I think when it comes to weekday tefillas in particular, it's very, very easy to fall into that trap of saying, well, I need to kind of concentrate on the whole thing, or at least I must be able to do that. The reality is that any level of concentration is really, really hard. It's really, really difficult. But a pathway towards helping us focus is to find particular moments, specific points that speak to us. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not that you're neglecting the rest of davening. It's that you're noticing particular places and particular words that speak to you. And that's very, very personal. So, the ideas that I'm going to share are just really things that happen to speak to me, or it's not like that you can absolutely do this in any way that you feel is appropriate. But the idea of trying to find a meaningful moment through noticing very specific points in the tefillah is, I think, I think is very helpful. So we begin with Moda Ani. First thing we say in the day is Moda Ani. Moda Ani would fit the criteria of those who have no time or ability to do anything else in the day in terms of davening, other than what we call one bakosha, which, as we learn, is the basic minimum for a woman to do. If you can't do anything else, at least one bakosha, one request, one tefillah. Moda Ani lefonecha would fulfill that criteria. Moda Ani. Yes, it's not technically a. It's really a thanksgiving, if you like. It's true. It doesn't. The way they paraphrase it here is Rav Noisha puts it is that it qualifies if it has to open with praise of Hashem and with thanksgiving, Hodah. Yeah, you're right. It's Berachos Hashachar, Berachos Zosi. Berachos Hashachar also doesn't have a specific, request within it. But it's a supplication. It's a tefillah. It doesn't seem to need to be a particular request for something. It's just Berachos Hashachar. But okay, whether or not it would Moda, either way, one says Moda Ani first thing in the morning, and the power of Moda Ani is the fact that the words are in that order. In Hebrew, it should say Ani Modeh. Yeah, that's what it should say. I thank. Why does it say Moda Ani? Because before we say the word Ani, we say Modeh, thank. It defines us for the rest of the day. So again, it's just a very, very, very simple point. Just understanding that the order of the words defines the day. When you enter the day with the word modeh, with the word thank, it means that every moment in the day has the potential to be an expression, if you like, of gratitude. So it's the gratitude of waking up in the morning. It's then the gratitude of every small thing that goes the right way. We live in the world of the what's it called, the Thank You Hashem movement. This is the idea, but it doesn't necessarily. Yes, that's right. But it's true that it is incredibly powerful to live one's life in that way. It's very difficult. We all go through times when it's easier and times when it's harder. But the power of saying Moda Ani first thing in the morning is it has the potential to frame the day. If I put the Modeh before the Ani, before the I in the day, that helps me along during the day.
Is it okay to say it twice?
Moda Ani, yes, in the sense that it is. Yes, it hasn't got Hashem's name in. We say even before we washed our hands, because of that, it says Melech Chai V'Kayom. So you say Moda Ani as soon as you wake up, before washing hands. Anything else, that's the first thing you do. So you could say it again if you wanted to later.
I wake up and then when I double, from the beginning, I just say it again.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem to say it again. I think the Gemara talks about not saying a modim twice, one after the other, straight one after the other, because of the concern that it looks like you're saying thank you to two different. You know what I mean? So technically, one says it once. I don't know if you particularly want to. I don't think there's a particular objection to it. But that is the beginning. That is the beginning. When we say Hama v'Shena, the next point on the sheet. Now, Hama v'Shena me'enai, right? So we say the brachas. Again, there's so much we could say on each of the brachas, but just pointing out this last one because it's the most confusing of all of the brachas. There are several major questions about Hama v'Shena. These ideas are based on Shimon Schwab, a remarkable sefer on Tefilla, which is in English, and it's just got some such beautiful ideas in. It's called Rosh Schwab on prayer. Shimon Schwab. Have you ever seen it? It's a fantastic sefer. What he says there is like this: there are confusions about Hama v'Shena me'enai, because what is the bracha? The bracha of Hama v'Shena, right? The longest of the brachas that we say, brachas HaShachar, it's a whole long paragraph. Is that it's about thanking Hashem for removing sleep from our eyes, basically waking that we can wake up in the morning, we can awake. The problem is lots of problems. Number one is that it should belong at the beginning of the list, right? Most of the list goes through things we get when we get dressed in the morning, we have put on our shoes, we have all the abilities that we have, Hashem, everything else. So you would think the first one would be Hama v'Shena, the one who removes sleep, right? That's the number one, that's waking up in the morning. Number two, the second question is, if you look at the order of the brachas in the morning, you have the last few before Hama v'Shena are about the Jewish people as a whole. They're not about personal things anymore, right? We say Ozer Yisrael B'Gvura, who girds Yisrael with strength, Ozer Yisrael B'Sefara, crowns Yisrael with splendor, and of Kirk, the strength of the weary, and then we go back to Hama v'Shena again. We go about sleep again, right? And the most surprising thing of all is, the general rule with brachas is you always got to begin and end the same way. And the end of the bracha of Hama v'Shena ends with the words Hagomel Chasodim Tovim Am Yisrael, who does kindness to his people Israel, which has nothing to do with sleep. So we begin with Hama v'Shena me'enai, remove sleep from my eyes, and we finish with Hagomel Chasodim Tovim, who does kindness to his people Israel. So the whole thing is really difficult to understand. Rav Schwab brings out of this, though, the most beautiful idea. He says the deeper meaning of this bracha is the fact that we know at this stage now, we're not just thanking Hashem for waking up, we're thanking Hashem for our special awakening as members of the Jewish people. What it means to be really awake in life. Not just awake as in awake from sleeping, but awake as in the appreciating the preciousness of our people, and therefore what we can do with our lives, if you like, during the day. He says that he describes this in quite a lot of detail. Don't go through to the time to go through it all. He points out that basically, if you look at Bereshis, you find that Adam goes to sleep, is put into sleep, and then Chava is created, right? And that is the creation of Chava. And we say that he exclaims, Zos hapam etzem etzome v'osem b'sori, this time it is flesh of my flesh, etc., Adam and Chava. But the question is that we don't find the Torah saying that Adam actually woke up. It doesn't say that he woke up from that sleep. So it says the idea is that actually he never did really wake up. The pristine creation that Adam and Chava, the Gemara says, there's an opinion they were one being beforehand. They were never back to that level again, right? They never really fully woke up to be completely cognizant of Hashem's presence. But when was it that the Jewish people managed to attain a glimpse of that level? Through those flashes of moments in our history, like Yetzias Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt. There are moments when we've been able to recreate that connection. So the idea is that when we say Hagom El Chasodim Totem Am Yisrael, we're thanking Hashem for waking us up, even though it's only been for brief periods of time. We connect to Hashem not just through our own personal feeling of waking up from sleep, but the fact that during our history as a people, we have woken up in those great moments and we can connect to them again. That's the idea of Hamar V'Shein Omein. I think it's a very, 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 very powerful idea. And it really sets the tone for, and if you look through the bracha, you can now understand why it's framed in this way, why it connects to the one who crowns Yisrael with splendor. It all comes together because that's what it's doing. It's taking us on the journey from the personal waking up to the waking up as a people, being part of the Klal Yisrael, and what that means for us as for our future. We say the next point is Baruch Atah Hashem. We say those words obviously multiple times. What exactly do they mean? There are different explanations of different explanations here. One I wanted to share with you again from Rav Schwab is, let me just find the piece that I wanted to, yeah. So he says that when we look at the words Baruch Atah Hashem, we actually mean that that we have this recognition of Hashem. He learns that Baruch comes from the word of to increase. It specifically means to increase. And here it is. That's it. That's what Melech Olam here is Baruch Atah. Yeah, that's right. He brings a pasuk here. He will increase. It's a pasuk in Shemos. Will increase your bread and your water. So what we're saying when we say those words Baruch Atah Hashem, the tefillah is that we daven that Hashem should be increasingly recognized in the world through our enhanced emunah and through the world at large. In other words, it's connected to Yiskadol Shmei Rabbah. For example, Yiskadol Shmei Rabbah, the fact that Hashem's name will be made great in this world. When we say Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, it's such an awkward and difficult translation. What we really mean is may recognition of you be increased in the world. Our emunah, which, as we explained last time, is a central part of what tefillah is meant to do. We said one of the key ideas of tefillah is to help us connect from a perspective of faith, help us develop emunah. So according to this, when we say those words, Baruch Atah Hashem, what we're really saying is, may our increased emunah, as is expressed through saying this bracha, lead to an increased awareness of Hashem in the world.
So us blessing Hashem is not for Hashem.
No, exactly. That's the point. That's the point. Yeah, that's right. So the Mefarshim really struggle with those words for that reason. Blessed are you Hashem. What does that mean? How can we say? Should we say Hashem is blessed? What does that mean? So therefore, some explain the most common explanation of Baruch Atah Hashem is that you are Makar HaBrachos. You are the source of all blessings. That's what it means, right? That's the most common explanation of Baruch Atah Hashem. The Avodram, classic commentary on Tefillah, says that's what it means. You are the source of all blessings. Rav Schwab gives a different explanation, which I think is deeply profound, and it's not a contradiction. Again, this is just another way of looking at it. This idea of increasing. When we say Baruch Atah Hashem, we want that recognition of Hashem to be increased in the world. And then you have the words Melech Ha'olam. Now, Melech Ha'olam, we translate again as King of the Universe. But the word Olam, fundamentally, throughout Tanakh, is connected to Ne'elam. Ne'elam means hidden. That's what it means. So the world itself is hidden. Why is the world hidden? Well, because there's very little we actually understand about the world that we live in, right? We feel like we grope around in darkness most of the time in what we do. And the point is, therefore, as Rav Schwab explains it, is that everything in the world is hidden from us. We don't understand what's going to be the next moment. We don't understand what life has in store for us. We don't understand so much about the physical world we live in. But the power of saying Melech Ha'olam, according to this, and is the idea that we understand, we draw comfort from the fact that although we don't understand it, although it's hidden from us, Hashem knows what's going on. He is Melech Ha'olam. He is king over that hidden existence. So in that way, those words, Melech Ha'olam, again, this is, I think, so important because we say it all the time. We're saying brachos all the time. So just, if you think of it this way, every time you say those words, King of the universe, Melech Ha'olam, yes, of course it has the simple meaning. You're expressing the fact that we believe King Hashem is in control of everything. Absolutely. It's not a contradiction. That's what it means. But on a deeper level, it is also a source of great comfort to us because it's a recognition of the fact that he is king of the hidden. He is king of that which is ne'elam, that which is hidden from us, but he knows what's going on. He has a plan. Despite everything that is hidden, we understand that he runs the show, which is a great source of comfort for us. Now, the final words I've got here on these little bullet points is the words of Atom Achaya Es Kulam. Those words appear in Vayivorech David towards the end of Pesukei, the Zimra, so just before Az Yoshev. Now, again, if you look at the list, there's not some time everyone has time to say, and this is absolutely not prescriptive at all. The reason why I included those words, and the translation is, you sustain every living thing, everything. You sustain everything. It's because when I was davening, when I was in Yerushalayim, I davened in a shul in Ramat Eshkol. The role of the shul was someone called Cheskel Weinfeld, a great Talmid Chacham, and I used to daven there every morning during the weekdays. And it struck me because the way he would daven Pesukei de Zimra is like everyone else who daven, it was done with a lot of kavanah. When he came to those words, he would pause and say them very clearly, very loudly, and as far as I remember, pretty much every day. That was his stand. I see this from the Rav daven, and that's how he would daven. It would be normal Pesukei de Zimra. He would get to those words and he would pause and say, V'ata mechayeh es kulam. You sustain everything. And I put it down here because it's something I've always sort of taken with me about, as I said, the power of a moment, where you're saying something all the time, but you can find a few words or even a word that you just stop. And before you say those words every day, and it can be the same words every day, that doesn't matter, but it can change the whole approach to tefillah because, you've sort of taken upon yourself that, right, these three words speak to me, so I'll focus on what those words mean. I mean, it's obvious why he chose those words, because it's just such a powerful statement, acknowledgement. You give life to all. You are the source of life. But it's absolutely not prescriptive. But to me, that was very powerful. And it's a similar idea, really. I saw in an interview, Rabbi Sachs, the Chaim was interviewed shortly before he passed away. A few years before he passed away. Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg interviewed him. He's a Rav in Boca Raton. You may have come across him. He's amazing stuff he produces. Absolutely, he's a internet star in many ways. Anyway, so he actually interviewed Rabbi Sachs in 2018. But he never published the interview. And when Rabbi Sachs passed away, so he published this interview. You can find it online. Just Google it. Just Google Ephraim Goldberg or Rabbi Sachs, and it's such a fascinating, very short interview. There's a transcript of it. Every bit of that interview is just a gold mine, just for ideas and just the humility and down to earth approach of Rabbi Sachs. And he asked him, how do you focus on davening? And he basically said the same idea. He said he tries to focus on that one phrase or one sentence, and that's it for the day. And that takes him through on the day. And he brought this beautiful example. In Pesukei de Zimra, in the Hallelujah, as we say, Hashem creates the cosmos, the star. He knows every name of every star. What's that? That's Hashem as creator of the universe. We also say, Hashem who builds Yerushalayim, he gathers in the exiles. What's that? That's Hashem as the one who shapes history. By the way, throughout davening, we'll come back to this hopefully, Amidst Hashem, next time we talk about our Shabbos Tefillah. This theme is absolutely runs the whole way through Tefillah. The idea of the Hashem as God of creation and God of history, right? Running history itself. But in between those two psukim, you have another line. And that line is the one who heals those who have broken hearts and administers their wounds. And the idea being that David HaMelech is saying there in Tehillim that sometimes healing one person's broken heart is as important as creating a universe or shaping history. And he said correctly, you could live off that for the entire year. It's just an amazing insight. It's such a beautiful insight. The way you have that one line, who heals the brokenhearted, between those two lines, between the line of Hashem who creates the world and Hashem who runs the trajectory of history. It's something which, when you see that, and I think when you understand an idea like that, it just brings home to us the majesty of Tefillah and the majesty of Tehillim. You know, the depth of Tehillim, the depth of the insight, the fact that David HaMelech in Tehillim places that line there between those two is just immensely powerful. Again, it's the same idea, finding one idea in Tefillah. Okay, any questions before we move on to the next slide? Everything clear? Okay. So, yeah.
Is it like a lesser prayer?
No, the answer is that it's not. It shouldn't be treated as a lesser prayer. The ideal, if one can, obviously, is to daven in Hebrew if one can. Nowadays, because we have the English available, that's the best thing to do, to daven in Hebrew and try and look across in the English to try and get an understanding of it. We believe that the Hebrew itself, Lashon HaKodesh, has invested within it, the language of the tefillahs. That's what you connect with when you say it in Hebrew. So one who is able to daven in Hebrew should do so. But if one cannot do so, then of course one absolutely can daven in English. And also we mentioned last time that one can certainly add, if one can't add a personal request, especially at the end of the Amidah, in Hebrew one can absolutely add in English as well. So I would say that the ideal is to try and daven in Hebrew if one can, even if one inevitably loses something in terms of understanding it, because you're connecting to that, to the words as they are meant to be. Every translation is only an explanation by definition. It's not the actual words. But at 100%, if one struggles with Hebrew, one's Hebrew isn't so good or whatever, one absolutely, if it's not possible to daven in Hebrew, then one can daven in English, sure. So when it comes to finding connection, and these ideas are all linked, and as I said, they hopefully will be useful in various ways. I thought it was just, this week's parsha, right? This week's parsha opens with the model of Tefillah. Vayachalo, he dreams. There is a ladder that is placed on the ground, and the top of the ladder is in Shamayim. The Malachei Elokim, the angels are going up and down the ladder. And that has always been, that image of Yaakov Avinu with the ladder has always been, for us, the idea of connection, and particularly through Tefillah as well. In another beautiful piece on Tefillah that Rabbi Sachs has, he talks about the idea that Tefillah has a structure, and the structure to Tefillah is one that is ascent, then a summit, arriving at the summit, and then descending from the other side. The ascent of Tefillah is the beginning part of Tefillah, Psukei de Zimra, right? That's the beginning of Tefillah. That's the ascent. It's like climbing a mountain. It's like climbing a ladder. He understands it almost as if you have the ladder going from earth towards Shamayim, towards heaven, and it's almost like we are the angels trying to climb that ladder. The ascent is Psukei de Zimra. What do we do? So much of Tehillim that we say for Psukei de Zimra reflect on creation. If you look at them, a lot of it reflects about the greatness of the world itself. So we are effectively using that as our way of climbing towards a connection with Hashem. We get to the revelation aspect, which is the summit itself. When you reach Baruch Hu, when we reach the Shema, when we reach the Amidah, we reach the summit effectively. It's almost like we're there at the top of the ladder. Now we feel the sense of the closeness to the Shekhinah. The idea being that it comes together at that moment of the Amidah itself, each one representing different parts. So when you're in shul, you have the quiet Amida, then you have the Amida that's said as a tzibur together with the whole Kehillah. They're both parts, all the elements are there together. And finally, you have the descent on the other side from the mountain, which are the tefillas that we say at the end. And why after the Amida? Why does that parallel redemption geula? And the answer is because if you look carefully at those tefillas, you see that they are very much focused on the ultimate future, the ultimate geula, the ultimate redemption. So we say Uvola Tzion Goel, for example, the Redeemer should come to Tzion. We say that in Oleinu as well, Oleinu B'Shaveach, right? We end the tefillah with Oleinu is really, that's what it is. It's a tefillah about how the future could be. It's a vision of what could be in the future. You know, if we've achieved anything through our davening, it's a glimpse into, before we return to the rest of our lives, you know, we have some insight into the majesty of what the future can be and will be one day, which is what Aleinu itself represents. One of the questions that people often ask, we discussed this briefly last time, is the idea and the challenge of saying the same thing all the time. You know, we spoke a little bit about that last time, and the fact that we have fixed tefillah. We have fixed tefillah. The primary reason is because although there was a time when everyone was able to make up their own tefillahs and it wasn't standardized, that seems to have been the case, for example, with Chana, obviously, when Chana is davening, you know, it's her own tefillah, it's her own tefillah. The reality is that what the Anshe Knesset Hagadola did, the men of the Great Assembly who lived around the time of the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash, what they did was they infused tefillah with a structure and words that every Jew would be able to connect with, even if they couldn't create their own tefillahs. It doesn't negate the fact that you can have your own tefillah, but at the same time, that's why we say the same thing. And the same challenge is, how do you maintain that inspiration, that insight? And the key here, I think, is the consistency. And there's a beautiful story. This is a written story of the $1 bill. It's a beautiful story that I read a while ago, a number of years ago. And it's not a Jewish story specifically, but I think it's got a very powerful message. There was a couple, their names were Howard and Karen, and they had gone out with each other whilst they were in college. They were American. She was 18 and he was 21. But they came from different parts of America. One came from San Francisco, the other came from New Jersey. And they didn't feel able to commit to each other long term. And they, at the same time, didn't really want to give up on the closeness of their friendship. So what they did was they did something very unusual. They agreed to meet it's a true story. They agreed to meet 5 years later, right, at 4:00 p.m. outside the New York Public Library on the first Sunday in May. When they left college, they went to different sides of the United States, but they agreed to meet exactly 5 years later at 4:00 p.m. outside the New York Public Library on the first Sunday in May. They wrote the pledge to each other that they would do this on a dollar bill. They tore it in half, the note, and they gave it to each other. Okay, that's what they decided to do. And then they went off their separate ways. That's what they decided. They made that agreement, and they just basically, the agreement, the idea was that if they would still hadn't found anyone else by that time, and they were still interested in each other, then they would both obviously be there. They would be there 5 years later, 4:00 p.m. outside the New York Public Library. And of course, it has the wonderful ending that they indeed both showed up 5 years later, and eventually this couple got married, as you would expect the ending. I wouldn't have another ending. But the point you would have another, it'd be a shame, you would have another ending story. But the point about the story is that, and this was an article that I read. I think they had written the article, one of them had written an article explaining the story. And they said it wasn't that it was all plain sailing afterwards, but the story itself that they shared kept them together. In other words, the commitment that they had through those years, the faith that they had demonstrated in each other over those years, despite having no other connection other than the two halves of this note and this agreement, right? That, they said, kept their relationship incredibly strong and still keeps them going to this day. By the time they read the story, they'd actually been married for 35 years, and that they framed it in their house, of course, that note. It's a lovely story. But I think what it demonstrates for our purposes in terms of tefillah is consistency to a cause, to an ideal, day after day, engenders commitment. And a major part of tefillah, like we said with emunah, is commitment. So when you are consistent in the same thing day in, day out, that demonstrates an incredible power of commitment. So that even though it's true that in theory, you might say, well, today I feel like davening a different way. Today I feel like doing things in a different order. Today I want to say a different thing. But the fact is what you lose from that is the consistency. And the power of the tefillas that we have means they're able to engender and prove almost to ourselves that commitment through the very fact that they're consistent. I think that's an idea which is perhaps helpful in the fact that we have the same tefillah, the same tefillas every day. I've written the words connection in the moment, the idea of and I've written Ba'al Zikni Amcha Beis Yisrael just because of something which is just very deeply personal. It's not anything, again, that is prescriptive in any way, shape, or form. It's really something I haven't done before or since. But towards the beginning of the pandemic, I was very taken. It was a share or something, someone, I don't know, I can't remember when and who said it, but right at those beginning months in March, someone mentioned, the idea that the people we would need to daven for the most were the elderly members of our community, right? Remember those terrible days when we realized that they would be the most vulnerable, how much we needed to protect the elderly, right? So again, I'm only sharing this with you, even though it's personal, because I felt like it might be helpful. And it's really something which it's not really like me at all, but I felt like for some reason, I took a pencil and a ruler and I just underlined those words in the siddur, in my siddur. I use the same siddur all the time, and I underlined them in Shachris. Those words, Ve'al Ziknei Amcha, right? Ve'al Ziknei Amcha B'Yisrael. They appear in Al Tzadikim, right? On the elders of the house of Israel. They appear there in the bracha of Al Tzadikim. Right? Yeah, they do. I think always Bulgaria, etc., etc., right? That's what they are. Ziknei Amcha B'Yisrael. And I don't even remember doing it actually, but I have this underlining there. And I remember when I don't remember exactly when I did it, but I did it somewhere at time at the beginning of the pandemic. I've left that underlining in the siddur, and every so often I'm davening shachris and it comes back to me just because I see the underlining. So it just demonstrated to me it's such a simple thing. I did it because I felt like I felt like a somehow connection. As I said, it was probably someone had mentioned those words in a shir, and it sort of connected to me because of what was going on. But it just, for me, it's such a simple thing to do. You might have one word that you feel now speaks to me today because of the situation I'm in. Take a pencil. It's okay. No one else is going to know, right? No one's going to see it. And it's your personal siddur, right? So all you need to do is just literally underline those words. And then every time you come back to those words, you'll see, wow, you'll remind yourself that's meaningful to me. It's just a simple idea. I said the idea is that these sessions are supposed to be practical. So that's a practical idea. Giving thanks. So we say those words in Modim. And again, Rashab has such a beautiful idea here. Modim, when we give thanks to Hashem for everything we've got, we say Erev Avoker B'Tzarayim. Translation, evening, morning, and afternoon. The easiest way of translating it. Rav Schwab says it has a secondary meaning. It can refer to the moods or circumstances that we find ourselves in life. Erev, in the evening, we sometimes find ourselves in an emotional state of Erev in the evening, yeah? That we feel things are declining, maybe because of age, maybe because of muzzle. Everything sometimes feels darker. We're more and more hopeless. We just feel we're sort of in an evening place, an Erev place. Boker is a person can be in a Boker state of life, he says, where we see lights coming into our life. Things are beginning to turn around bit by bit. Sometimes we go through those phases as well, the idea of being in the morning, the Boker. And then we also have experience of the Tzaharayim of life. What is the Tzaharayim of life? Tzaharayim, although when you translate as afternoon, it really means the time when the sun is at its brightest. That's what it really means. The brightest point in life, right? There's bright sunshine around. We feel that we're on top of the world. That's what the Tzaharayim represents. So in this sense, he says, what we're trying to say when we say, thanks to Hashem, al chayenu mesurim b'yodecha, is effectively saying that we thank Hashem for our lives, which you hold in your hand, your wonders, all the good things you do for us. However, we currently feel we are living our lives, right? However we feel, whether we feel we're living our lives as a state of Erev, a state of Boker, whether things are difficult, whether things are going well, and whether things are going fantastically well, right? We appreciate the need to give thanks. Such a beautiful and powerful idea to me. Again, just as I say, it speaks to me. And finally, before the final concluding point, is Rav Bernstein has a beautiful piece about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and he asks, why is it that the Kohen Gadol had to wash his hands after he changed his garments? You know, he had to change multiple times, right? He went to the mikveh, and every time he changed, he had to wash his hands. And each time he had to wash his hands both before and afterwards. Every time, even when he changed back and changed it, whatever. So he says, what was the idea of washing the hands afterwards, especially even when he left for the final time? He left the Kodesh HaKadoshim for the final time. Why does he have to wash again? He's finished now. So the answer is, says Rabbi Bernstein, that the Kohen Gadol, if he leaves it there in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, if he leaves everything he's gained inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, then it won't affect his life and the life of the Jewish people going forward. So what we achieve in Tefillah, we want to find some way of infusing and inspiring our lives. That's the message, somehow carrying it forward. How we do that is very difficult, but to try and take some inspiration that will actually make a difference to our lives going forward. Okay? That's really difficult, isn't it? It's really difficult. Look, one is an example that we started, right? So when appreciating what it means to give thanks, right? So that it might be that we take from a tefillah on a particular day, we say thank you for something that we haven't appreciated before. Something, you know, we know the big things. The big things, we give thanks to our health, for our families, etc. But something might be a small thing. So we take from a tefillah on a particular day, for example, there's a small thing that I didn't notice before. These things are really personal, so it's really hard to, you know, we can think of things, but yeah.
I was going to say, I said with depressed patients. So when you are just sort of in a dark place and you're only thinking about your own sorrow, actually training people to think about gratitude.
Yeah.
I can see, I have hands, I can do.
That's right.
So it's training your mind to see actually the world isn't such a dark place. That's right. Actually, this is what mindfulness is, which is like
absolutely, 100%. Yeah, this is 100%. Well, what Tefillah can afford us, at least for a few brief moments, because that's achieving a tremendous thing if we can get it for a few brief moments. This is the Jewish way of meditation, of mindfulness, of everything else that can make a real difference. It's the same thing, you know. It's also well known, for example, that sometimes if people are, what can also help people who are either, clinical depression is very complex, but even people who are feeling in a depressed state, is becoming altruistic. Sometimes you'll see people will do something for another and it will change their own mood. So it's, you know, it's again just somehow removing from oneself. Absolutely. Exactly. The final idea here, which is really self-explanatory, I've reproduced the whole thing on the sheet, is from Rav Soloveitchik and Rayona Tefilla, on his Svarim on Tefillah, where he basically says, encapsulates in beautiful words the end of the Amidah. At the end, not quite the end, of course, we say L'kain and so the personal, that's the personal request at the end, but the last bracha is Sim Shalom. What is Sim Shalom, he says? Sim Shalom means that we ask Hashem to grant that peace, the good, the blessing, etc., etc. We have wandered, we encircled around, he says during Tefillah. We've gone through all the emotions, the love, mercy, moments of fear and helplessness, descent from the heights of longing, elevation to depths of confusion and terror. We've gone through all those emotions, but the place we end up in when we end the Tefillah is a sense of serenity. Hashem appears as a serene dwelling place, a secure habitation. The idea being that, and it's very poetic, lounging in green pastures, secure in him as a son in his father, his torn and troubled soul finds happiness and calm. The amazing thing about Soloveitchik is his first language wasn't English, and he was able to express ideas, you know, in such profound words. His fear and anxiety are forgotten. The terrible mystery is gone. In their place reigns happiness, the rush towards the source of all existence. Man does not flee from God, rather he runs towards him. All embraces him, nestles close to the divine presence. All is surrounded by calm and peace. The blessing and bounty of the infinite one rain down on everything, etc., etc. And basically, what I think he's trying to convey here is that if there's one thing that our tefillah wants to leave us with, it's the notion of peace. It's the notion of achieving some measure of peace and acceptance about life and ourselves. It's not that that's the only message of tefillah, but we end with Sim Shalom. It's a tefillah, it's a prayer for peace, right? But if we think about what those words mean, it's ultimately an idea of the power and the impact that that sense of peace can have on us and on our lives. And again, it comes back really to that point of how if we allow it to, tefillah can affect our day. It's not going to change everything, and we will go through multiple days where we don't feel anything at all. And when that's the case, we'll fall back on the story of the $1 note, and we'll say it's okay because I've got commitment and I've got consistency, and I'm not going to feel it today, but maybe I will next week or next month or whatever, and that's okay, and that's fine because I'm showing my commitment through keeping going, right? But every so often you will notice one thing, one small thing, and we should never be afraid and never be upset, for example, if that comes through the fact that it's personal, as we began, the power of the personal. Remember, Chana is the one who says, El anar hazeh spalalti. I davened for this. This is mine. This was my tefillah. This was so meaningful to me, and you granted this to me, Hashem. We should never be afraid of, we should never be upset, if you like, that it's that which, when we feel our tefillah is most powerful, when we have something specific to daven for. That's okay. That's fine. That's what tefillah is for. We shouldn't be upset about that. That's what Chana says. But if we can also go through our tefillahs with that sense of what a meaningful moment is, as we went through, finding those moments that speak to us, understanding the key points of tefillah, so that they can, as we said, find connection, then hopefully we can arrive at the end of tefillah. We can get to those words sim shalom, and it can really have, I think, an effect on the day that is ahead of us. That's basically what I wanted to share with you. Anyone want to ask a couple of questions, or we're okay? Yeah.
Just wanted to say that I have heard this mentioned a story about Rabbi Abraski, I think it was.
Okay.
Someone went and asked him to done something like that. And he said, well, something about what you know that I've done that every day. So there is something about every day. There's in Benching, it says, the Lord gave one that stuff. So a different interpretation of this was that he went back to Rabbi Cohen, back to his and I thought it was very interesting because what you mentioned here, I will finish with Hashem fixes broken hearts. So I have him right by done that. But some of the family has heart operation, Hashem fixes broken hearts. Then I had Rabbi Cohen go on that point another time, and he mentioned this for a British there. He talks about Hashem fixing broken hearts. He says, take the letters, they first of each says 100 praise. So I thought this was so amazing.
Yeah, it's a lovely idea.
That so I can have that double one something when I'm reading that and give praise to Hashem.
Yeah. 100%, absolutely, and 100%. It's such a beautiful idea, and the idea that you can also hold two different explanations in your mind at once on certain words. They can speak to you in one way, others they can speak to you in a different way. That's okay. That's the power of the words. Absolutely. Yeah. I think unless we have any other questions about tefillah before you go, I'm not that I'm restricting what you want to ask. Everyone has left the floor open to you, John. What's Israelite?
And my only good reading isn't so and I just want to know if there are other people that you can say to Hillel in Hebrew, is it better for me not to say that to Hillel at all?
You say it. You keep going. You keep going. I know what you mean. That.
She doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And I should be doing Hebrew.
I mean, I don't think the Tehillim that are said in those contexts, like, are people are prescriptive into how specifically they're said. The most important thing, you're putting the meaning into the tefillah. It's a tefillah, right? So that's what it's being said for. The alternative would be for you to, not do it, which. Yes, absolutely. Unless you become fluent, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you can combine it in that way, so that you can when you have an opportunity, exactly, or it's a shorter one you're familiar with. It could be one that's davening. There are some which are more familiar than others in that sense. But I think at the end of the day, the power there is the fact that people are part of it and want to be there and want to daven in that way.
No, but you're not also you're under a time constraint. You may say I'm doing this one, but it doesn't mean you have to finish this one before the next person.
Yeah,
starts.
exactly.
So you can take it
Yeah, often people will split it like that. I don't do so much. I've seen that people
Or they wait.
Yes.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. It's a fascinating phenomenon. It's such a contemporary modern phenomena that even it's reflective of the world we live in, but it's quite amazing.
I find it quite humbling. I want to do at the moment. And sometimes some people on the group and sometimes you look at the people who are saying it, on the group, you think, wow, it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, they found the time.
And I find that quite I find that quite humbling.
There you go. That's the connection amidst the chaos. That was the time. That was the title, absolutely. But no, it really is. It's very profound. So anyway, hopefully it's helpful and useful. In 2 weeks' time, we will have the third and final session where we will be looking at Tefillos and Shabbos. Oh, you have a question? Sorry. Yes. Yes. Yes.
How far do we go to say the name of all the following, especially when we don't know it?
You mean how far do you go in terms of how ill they are, or?
Like, if it's someone who's unfortunately unwell.
Yes.
For a long period of time.
Yes.
Are we supposed to say it every day the name and also people who we don't know?
Yeah.
And we are asked for them. How long do we go?
It's a difficult one in the sense that if you put every name in that you came up, you would be davening for a very long time. So that you can't necessarily put every name in, but I don't think if the person is still unwell, then their name can go in there. Absolutely, there's nothing then they.
Yeah, but what is also understanding as well is that sometimes you don't get updated.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I think we've all been in that position. We've done it for someone years and years. That person still, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's a good idea to try and I think it's a good idea if you can to try and find out every so often, especially done for an awfully long time, how is the person doing? If they're still unwell, then you leave the name on, and if not, then That's right. I think you have to be realistic about what you have to be realistic. I think about what you can do. You also don't have to do the same names every time. I know that's complicated because it's easier when you. you can add different names, different times. You also might have times in the week when you have more time to daven. There might be a tefillah during the week. I know someone who, for example, and then someone I know very well actually, who every Friday mincha says as part of they add into the end of the Amidah the Tefillas Hashlah. Have you heard of the Tefillas Hashlah? Yeah. It's a tefillah for children. So this person every Friday mincha, you might say that's a really difficult time to put that in there of all the ones you're going to choose. But he is a man. He doesn't in shul. He has it in his siddur. So when he gets to shul Friday mincha, his Friday mincha is longer than a regular mincha, which isn't a problem. Once you're in shul, you're in shul. So you keep going. And then he says that tefillah for children, for his children, he says that once a week. And in a kind of adds it into the Amidah at the end of the Amidah once a week. Again, that's not prescriptive. That's just you might find another. You might know that on a particular day or evening or more, whatever, you have a chance to daven a bit longer. Then you might say, okay, fine, I'm going to put a tefillah in there at the end of the Amidah. To the end of the Amidah, yes. You can technically add anywhere if it's the what we call the Ein HaBracha, if it's the right place for the tefillah. The advice generally is to put it in after after Yulotz and the beginning of Elokai Netzor or in the middle of Elokai Netzor, because there you can add any tefillah, in Hebrew or English, during the last part of the
I'd just like to say 2 things. First of all, about davening for people. I will never forget when my Abigail, who's now 15 and a half, was born. She wasn't well, and people were davening for her. And she was still in hospital. We went for a walk. Do you remember? We went to Hampstead. We went for a walk. I was discharged for a bit of a walk. And we came across some girls, and you started chatting, and they said, "Oh, is this the mum of Abigail? Is this the Abigail? Sister Mother?" And I was so comforted by these strangers that were davening for my daughter. So even though you might not know the people you're davening for, I just want you to know that there's so much power in davening for these people. Like I said, I had no idea who these strangers were, but to this day, I feel so comforted by and so grateful to these people for davening for her. So
I think that's a really important point, and you see that people feel the chesed you're doing for a family. You know, what can I do? Well, you can't do anything medically, but it's such a chesed. They really feel it. They, you know, you've really helped them when they know people are davening for them. It's yeah.
I had to go for really major surgery, really major, and I got back on time. You know, it wasn't as advanced as it is today. You know, it was in the last century. And the nurses said to me as I was going down to get to this, just so calm. Why are you so calm? Do you realise how serious? And I said, "But people
The transparency.
No, I don't know. I said, "Look, people are praying for me. People are praying," and that really helped me. Yeah. You know, it was.
Yeah, very moving. Absolutely. Absolutely makes a big difference. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very good. Okay. Fine. So next 2 weeks time we will
I just got some practical questions.
sure. Go on, let me just turn up the Zoom then.
I think on the